27-year-old Robert Ackermont had everything going for him. He had a master's degree, a good job, but then something went wrong, and now his father says his son has confessed to murdering 3 people.
I don't believe it. It's hard to believe. He's been good. I've had no indications that anything was wrong, with his life.
It's just hard to comprehend of what he did, and yet there's still love for him because he was my child. I can't turn down. Brings the memories back of what took place on this spot. The last time I was here was bringing the police in '95 and showing them where Scott's body was, because my son had told me what shaft he put Scott's body in. I remember everything that took place. When the body bag came up, there was the smell of death. The memories there always will be. But I feel I'm a strong person, and I was taken down. I was taken down to the weakest point in my life. I bought this bar in 1997. I came to work here in '89. It's been good to me. Come to work every day, 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week.
Do most of the people, your regulars, do most people here know your story?
When all of this happened with the murder and looking for him and people knowing that it was my son, they were shocked that how could Robert could have done this. They're in disbelief just like I was. They know him. But more so of how I felt about him, how he achieved so much, and then to have this tragedy. It was a relief to talk to them. It was, you could say, a therapy for me to get it off my chest rather than bottle it and think about it, where a normal person wouldn't do what he did. What his mindset is, when it came about, I don't have the answer. I was concerned when they arrested him that what did I do wrong that made him become the person that murdered people. And even today, even though it's all done, you might say, you still wonder because there's no cut and dried answer. His mother had that picture taken. He was a cute kid. There were good moments, the giggles and the laughter and, still a baby. To look at the picture and think back when this took place, there's not much thought other than the future part of what could have been that went wrong. When Robert was born and you seen him and you held him and the baby, well, being a father kicks in and you had love for your child. You wanted to be the father, and then we planned the next child because we wanted them close together. as a young child, him and his brother would go with me up to the ranch. They'd play together. If they worked with me, they'd both work until they got bored, and then they'd do what kids do. You know, they'd play ball together and run and hide and stuff like that. To me, between Robert and Kenny, Kenny was a little more rebellious, especially down with his mother. I'll say he was a hellraiser. But it's just between the two of them. For Robert, he was a strong one. To look at him, if you were there, he was just a nice, easygoing kid with no problems, and just a child that you were proud to have because there were no issues. Robert was, let's say, upset living with his mother. He didn't want to live with her no more. So I get the phone call that he wants to come live with us. He was just a young teenager, even though he's 12 years old. You know, I was happy that he wanted to come live with us. We didn't have issues with him. I feel Robert stood out because he was a smart kid in school, his grades. It's just everything he did was a positive, that when he was with my wife and I, he just didn't get in trouble. He'd go in his room to study, and when I went in to check on him and see if he needed help or nothing, he seemed to know what was going on. You know, later in life, he got a computer and taught himself the computer, got the books and learned it and made programs out of it. He was that smart. Nobody recognized that he was a genius. Well, in hindsight, I can look at it and say, you know what? He was a genius. He was that smart of a kid. Not smart alecky, he was just a smart, intelligent person. But you didn't see it. I could say no more than he was a good kid that I put up on a pedestal. I wanted to take the chemistry set back because it wasn't right to steal it. It's not the right thing to do. And I felt by making him take it back, it would bestow in him that you don't steal. I called out, talked to the principal, and I said, I want you to do something about it. Put the fear of God in it. So the principal talked with him. He threatened, you know, the police, but he was going to let it go this time. But I'd hoped that it put some sort of fear into him that you don't do it. I had no reason to think that he was a bad kid. Growing up, I learned what was right and wrong, and you think that you're teaching it to your kids. You discipline them for things that they're doing bad and let them know that they can't do that. So I felt that in that sense, I was letting them know the difference between right and wrong. The reason I brought up these issues of the chemistry set, I'm looking for answers of why did you do what you did doing these crimes? You feel like you did something in order to make your son do what he did. So it's just, the whole thing is sad, everything. The ranch, it's a home away from home. It's peace of mind. It's hard to describe just how much it does mean to me. With my son bringing Scott up and disposing of him the way that he did, he put a cloud, a shadow on this place and all the families involved in the harm that he caused them.
What's in this box?
Newspaper clippings that people have given to me, some of the Stockton record that I've clipped out, an article that I was given about I believe it was a father turned his son in. I got phone records of my son during the time that he was going back and forth with Scott's body to bring him up here and dump him in the mine shaft. My wife and I sat down and put together on a calendar his movements and phone calls. That's in here. The police had access to that. When I got started to dig through this box to get the articles and let you know what I had, it brings up what had happened 30 years ago. It reminds you of all the bad. There was no good in this. You felt bad, you feel sad. It brings out the anger again. In some cases, the doubt. What's the truth? What isn't the truth? Brings back up, where's the closure? What's the answer? That, why? But I hang on to it. I ought to burn it, but I don't wish to. That's Robert at graduation, and he was valedictorian and gave a speech. But there again, Robert was a smart person that achieved things, and this is one of those examples. I feel Robert was a confident person. I don't know that he had to get up anywhere to give a speech. He was the dominant person. When he was with his friends, he was the one that was in charge. They looked up to him, and it's sort of like they were the followers and he was the leader. After Robert graduated, he went to work for Roadway Trucking down south. Roadway is a major trucking company that delivered freight to different businesses. But he was in charge over several truck terminal managers. The impression I got from him was he was happy with his job. Everything's going well. And then one day, I find out that he quit. He tells me he was working on a software program that had to do with trucking, and that if he had stayed with Roadway, they would have claimed it to be their property because he invented it while he was working for Roadway. Everything that he had accomplished, the sky is the limit. You figure he was going places and going to be very successful. He stopped by, came in and visited. When it was time for him to leave, he said, I want to show you something. So he went to his car and he got the little handgun. Well, that was a 25, I believe is what it was. The only thing I knew Robert owning other guns was a pellet gun that I bought. I took it and I looked at it. I said, that's nice. I gave it back to him. I said, just be careful. Then he got to his car and he left. But again, when all this happened, I remember that day, him showing me the gun, and to this day, I remember that whole scene, and I just felt like that meant trouble, and yet I had no idea what type of trouble. It just felt wrong, yeah. Why would he have it? I don't know, it wasn't right. You know, hindsight looking back, it's like, you know, something's going to happen, and that's what I felt that day. But I didn't know what. I was hitting bar in the morning. I believe it was not long after the bar opened that he come walking through the door. It was very weird for him just to show up unannounced. He always called in advance and said, hey, I'm coming up for whatever reason. Are you going to be up the ranch, or are you going to be home? And you see him and say, oh, what are you doing? He said, well, I come by to see you and let you know I was up the ranch. I don't remember hugging him that day, but he looked dirty. He just didn't smell bad. He stunk. And in hindsight, having been around dead people, that's, to me, is what he smelled like. But at the time, you know, said, God, you smell like a dead person. And asked him if he was hungry, and yeah. So he went down and got a small pizza. We ate it. And he says, well, I'm going to go home. So, okay. And he left. There was nothing to think anything else than what he told me, that he'd gone up the ranch and came out. About 2 months later, my father had a heart attack. I drove him to the hospital. He was in a room when I get the phone call. Well, and it was my younger son, Kenny, telling me that they were looking for Robert because he killed somebody. And I said, wait a minute, what? He said, they're looking for Robert because he killed somebody. While he's telling me that, I am not putting two to two together. It was hard to digest and realize that he was actually talking about Robert. He was the angel. He was the one that didn't do no wrong. You're thinking that there was a mistake, that this can't be true. You know, you're in disbelief that even we're talking about this. It just couldn't happen. I've got 30 years since it happened. And it's like out of sight, out of mind, but there's still stuff that reminds you. I've never known anybody that a family member or child of theirs has ever murdered anybody. When the murders happened and that person that did the murders was my son Robert, there was a moment in there that I wished we never had him. Robert was a good kid. He's never done anything that I'd be ashamed of. This is the only thing in his life that I know of that has affected me to the degree that I was ashamed to be his father. I believe that people can do evil things, but with Robert, I never saw the evil until all of this came about.
Police all over the West had been looking for 28-year-old Robert Acramont. Acramont was wanted by police in Medford, Oregon for the murders of Roxanne Ellis and Michelle Abdul, real estate women and lesbian activists whose bodies were found in the bed of Ellis's truck.
Acramont also killed a Visalia man, a man who was last seen with Acramont 2 months ago.
When I saw the U-Haul, I said, it's gotta be Robert. And with that thought, it was if I go in the house with my gun, it's like, do you go in with a gun drawn because you're capturing somebody? Do you go in with your gun and he hears the door and he pulls his gun out, not knowing who's there? This goes through your head. The last thing I wanted to do was shoot my son, or possibly both of us get shot. So I just drove past, went around the block. I never thought about helping him get away. Once it was there, it's like you wanted to catch him because you want to know why. And you didn't want him to do harm to anybody else. So those are my thoughts, is, you know, he needs to be caught. I had the choice. I could have aided and abetted and, you know, get out of town, but It wasn't easy. And we fall back to that right and wrong of growing up. And it was wrong in what he did. Then I chose to use the phone and call the police. And that's probably the hardest thing I ever did. Yeah. Some people would say I didn't love him because I turned him in. And that's wrong. I loved him, and I was worried about other people dying for no reason. It's just not the right thing. So I had to put a stop to it.
Police arrested Ackermont early this morning after a family member tipped police that he was in the area.
They even had the license number of the U-Haul truck he was driving.
Sir, did you commit these murders? What can you tell us?
At the time, all this is coming to light. Is you don't think about, here's my son I've had so high, and now I'm down at the bottom. You're dealing with this in disbelief. You don't want to believe it. But everything I'd learned that was going on in his life was the first time when these murders occurred. I learned that he was in debt. Took a while, but found out he was in debt over $100,000 on credit card. His business failed when he did the software, made the software for the trucking company. It failed. I had to believe he killed for money. They just lowered a second rescue worker down the shaft to help recover a body. Bothers you that he brought Scott's body up and dumped him down the mine shaft on the ranch property. That bothers you, you know. And again, every time you go up there, you see the mine shaft and you can't help but think about what took place. I wanted to talk to Robert, say what's going on, why is it going on, what did you do, why did you do it? I mean, a bunch of questions. I think that the police might have told him that I told them that he was in the U-Haul, so I turned him in. Because that was a question that he asked me, did you turn me in? And I said, yes, I did. He said, I will F your life up. And I think that was the end of the conversation. And then after that's when all the bad letters started coming. He sent the Stockton Record a letter. Well, I got my mail, the Stockton Record got theirs. They just said as a child he was molested. If you think of it sexually, he wrote it down. But he was gonna F my life up. And then I got phone calls from Medford Police, Stockton Police, Visalia Police. I got phone calls from Hawaii. I got phone calls from New York wanting to know if I molested my son.
That's the letter he wrote to the Stockton Record.
Yeah. My earliest moments were during 5-6 when my father, Ken Ackermont, began fondling me sexually. This stress led to bedwetting, which also drew punishment, severe beatings with a ruler, and being stood in front of the living room window naked all day for all to see. He was trying to destroy my life because he felt that I destroyed his. He's upset. I understand that part of it. Did I give it any thought that he would go this route? Nope. But when he sent me the letter, he also sent a letter to the Stockton Record explaining what I did to him, his stepmom did to him, what we forced him to do. He accused me of sodomizing him having sex with my wife, being forced to watch porno movies, him being forced to watch his dog have sex with my wife. I took it as, I'm writing this to hurt you, not for any other reason, because he wanted to get under my skin. He wanted me to feel guilty. Comes down to you believe it or not. I know it took place, and I know it never happened. Not a lot of people said anything about it, other than, how could he do that to you? I was mad, I was angry, I think I wanted to kill him. I was so pissed at him. Everybody asked me if it was true, and all I can tell them is no, it's not true. But, again, he was hurt, he wanted her back. I think any parent that has to go through what I've gone through, you have to wonder, was it something I did? Why would he write letters? Because that's not how he was brought up, and where he went wrong, I have no idea. So now it doesn't make sense to me. Why are you killing people? I didn't look at it like, you're a killer. You're my son, and I want to know why. What have I done? What happened? And you don't know. At first, I'm taking the blame. I'm trying to figure out what I did. And everybody's told me you didn't do nothing. And I realized I didn't do nothing. There was a point there, I felt like I did something, to the point of breaking down. I felt like taking my life. I didn't tell nobody. But that's just how wrapped up you get, that can't deal with it. End it. I said I wasn't going to do this. It's not me. I wanted to say something to him. I wanted to say it in person to him. I felt that I had to. I couldn't turn, say, in the court at the time and plead for his life. In this case here, I didn't run from the problem. I dealt with the problem of turning him in. That was the problem, of turning him in to stop him from murdering people. I believed the eye for an eye. I believed in the death penalty, and I couldn't beg for his life because that's not me. The day I got up to read it, I was very nervous. It was hard to stand there and read the letter knowing that your son was going to get the death penalty. First, I'd like to say to the George family, along with the Ellis and Abdul families, how sorry I am for the horrendous crimes my son committed against your families and loved ones. Robert, I have never told you how deeply you have hurt your mother, brother, myself, and so many other people. You can't even count them. The day I had learned and knew you committed these crimes, my heart was torn from my chest. All the hopes and dreams as a father has for his son were gone. I am still your father, so I will be here for you. I only hope you could be put to death for the crimes you committed that I would have passed before. For this would only be a double stab in my heart. Robert, you were my number one son. I held you so high. You achieved so much in life, but threw it away. For only through our Lord can your soul be saved for the crimes you committed against other humans. I'll always love you. That was tough that day to have to do that. But I said it, and I felt better after saying it. I wanted him to die in a sense because he murdered people. I've told everybody, I am for the death penalty. He's just not that person out killing people just to be killing them. He killed for money, but it was wrong. And if he ended life in prison, that's one thing. If he got the death penalty, that was another. And there's nothing I could do about it. And I wasn't going to go beg for it. And I'm sure he thought I should be on his side, help him out, do what I could. But he did it to himself. Yep, that's him. If you look at the other pictures, he's put on an awful lot of weight. One of the officers in the prison took the pictures. So he's on one side of the glass, I'm on the other. Once the trials were over and he was in Oregon prison, Salem, a period of time went by and I had this urge. I just had to see him. That's when I went up and talked to him. And to me, it's like having a ghost. I mean, it was a driving force. Nothing was going to hold me back. I had to go see him. It was something in me. I couldn't let go. And I wanted answers. There was just a feeling, like a drive, that I needed to see my son. And not for any particular reason, not to apologize for anything I've said or done or how I ever treated him in life. I just needed to see him. You know, if the window wasn't there and you were meeting in that same room, on my part, I would have hugged him. I don't know if he would have wanted it. Got in to see him, and that lasted about 15 minutes, and I wanted to leave because I'm going to use the mental state that he was in. I don't know if he was putting on a show or he was actually falling apart mentally. Then he started to go off the edge and talk about people behind the wall and that they're listening and they know what you're going to say before you say it. And I'm thinking, where's this crap coming from? And he would continue with that. I said, well, this isn't the person I come to see, and I can't stand this. That's all he's talking about. I wanted to leave. After that visit was the last time I spoke with him. When Robert died in prison, I came and placed Robert here in the grave in my plot, my family plot. He's part of the family still. I haven't abandoned him. I put flowers up every year on him.
Why do you put flowers on his grave?
I put flowers on his grave because Robert's still my son, regardless of what he did. To learn the things that he did, I don't look at it as you're tearing him down off that pedestal I had him on. He's already fallen. But I still care an awful lot about him. It is difficult, even though he's dead, it's difficult to wipe him out of your mind that he never was there. Because he was there, and I was proud of that person. I do believe in heaven and hell, and that there's got to be a God that's created all this. Everybody would hope that they're members in heaven. I hope he's there, but that's not my choice. You know, if there's a God, and I believe there's got to be somebody higher than me that's created all this, then he'll answer to him. I'll say I think about it all the time, but not every day. but it's on your mind, even today. What did I do? Why? If it was all about money. But then you say, well, could I have helped him? I could have given him money.
Have you watched or read his police interview?
No, the only thing I got was the transcript of when I was there.
Go ahead when you're ready.
I wish I could say it was just about that. It'd be a lot easier, but it didn't. A long time. I'll finish you off without Scott. Will be nothing. Anything. I just always wanted to do it. You don't care for them. So that was the time, no place, the opportunity. Didn't. Is that true, isn't it? Doesn't feel a goddamn thing. Thought I was so guilty. How long did you know that he had these thoughts? You were a kid since you were high school, since you were in college. Since I was a kid, the longer I go about that, I think I can do it in a long time. You got somebody.
First time I've ever seen any of this stuff. But these are clips that puts a different light on what I was told by a lot. That, you know, he says he was wanted to kill. We didn't see it. We didn't know it.
Earlier, you referenced to being a serial killer. Is that what you are? Well, the first definition. Mass murder does something innocent. Kills people as part of the same act. Serial killer is separate incidences. We're talking out period. You figured out what was all the same act. Nothing thinking about that.
So do you look at him a little differently now?
I don't know that I got any emotion right now. I didn't know he was a serial killer. I would hate to go up there and dig his plot up because I pissed at him. I could take and dig it up and put him down the mine shaft, I guess. But take him out of the family plot. But it's not that I don't love him anymore. Less. He's my child. I look at him differently as he's a serial killer. If I were to look back, I'd blame myself in a way for not being the best parent I could have been, because I've been a workaholic all my life. By going in Candy Bar at night, we just didn't do a whole bunch together outside of I worked. He went to school. So it wasn't a lot of fun time playing as much as it was working. Could you feel like for him to do this, how as parents, what did we do wrong? So you lose that bond of a family. I regret that part of it. Not being there when you feel like you should have been there. So to blame myself, yeah, there's blame for myself. I don't forgive him. Those are crimes that you don't forgive people. You know, there's a punishment to it. And he was given his punishment, and they just didn't have time to carry it out before he died in jail. But, you know, how did it change my life? Well, it changed it to where you're pissed off, you don't sleep, it's on your mind all the time. So as time goes on, well, it gets a little easier, but you still think about it today. And here we go.
The rain started just after midnight. Thin at first, barely visible beneath the orange glow of the streetlights lining the empty roads of Ashford County, Florida. By 2 a.m, the storm had swallowed the town whole. Thunder rolled over rooftops like distant artillery. Palm trees bent under violent wind. Dogs barked behind locked fences and then suddenly stopped, one by one, until the entire neighborhood fell into a silence so complete it felt staged. That was the night 17-year-old Lily Mercer vanished. No screams, no broken windows, no frantic 911 call cutting through the static. Just an unlocked front door swaying slightly in the storm and a television still glowing blue inside the Mercer family living room. Her shoes remained near the couch. Her backpack sat untouched beside the stairs. Half a glass of orange juice rested on the kitchen counter, diluted by melted ice. And on the second floor, her bedroom window was open. The police would later say the scene felt wrong immediately. Not violent, not chaotic. Worse, controlled, quiet, deliberate. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The road steamed beneath the Florida heat. News vans flooded into town before noon. Helicopters circled overhead. Volunteers walked through swamps carrying sticks and flashlights. The sheriff's office described it as a possible runaway case for less than 6 hours before retracting the statement under pressure from the family, because Lily Mercer was not the type to disappear. Straight A student, varsity swimmer, no history of drugs, no secret boyfriend, no signs of depression. She had plans that weekend. College applications spread across her desk. A birthday dinner scheduled with friends. Her mother said Lily was terrified of storms and would never leave home willingly during one. But there was something else. Something the police never released publicly. At 3:17 a.m., a neighbor reported hearing a car engine idling outside the Mercer residence. Not driving. Waiting. The witness described an older white pickup truck parked beneath the trees across the street. Headlights off. Engine running. A man sitting alone inside. The witness could not identify his face. Only a cigarette. Burning bright in the dark. Then the truck disappeared before sunrise. For years, that detail haunted investigators more than anything else. The cigarette. The waiting. The feeling that whoever took Lily Mercer knew exactly when to arrive and exactly when to leave. Ashford County was a kind of town where people left doors unlocked. Population under 6,000. One diner. One gas station. One church standing at the center of town like a watchtower. Children rode bicycles after dark. Everyone knew everyone else's name. Or at least they thought they did. The Mercer house stood near the edge of Pine Hollow Road, surrounded by heavy woods and shallow marshland. Investigators spent weeks searching every inch of terrain nearby. Divers entered muddy retention ponds. 9 units tracks and trails that vanished abruptly near the roadside. Then came the first strange detail. Lily's scent stopped directly beside the asphalt. No signs of struggle. No footprints. No blood. Just absence. As if she had stepped willingly into a vehicle. The FBI joined the investigation within days. Missing posters spread across Florida highways. National media picked up the story. Tips poured in by the hundreds. Most led nowhere, until detectives learned about the neighbor, Daniel Harlow, 38 years old, quiet, divorced, lived alone in the yellow house directly across from the Mercers. He worked nights as a maintenance mechanic at an industrial refrigeration plant 15 miles outside town. No criminal record. No history of violence. Neighbors described him as polite but distant, the kind of man who waved without smiling. And he owned an older white pickup truck, the same model described by the witness. Investigators questioned him less than 48 hours after Lily disappeared. Harlow remained calm. Too calm, according to one detective. He claimed he left for work before midnight and stayed there until morning. Said he knew nothing about Lily beyond casual greetings. Said the witness must have seen another truck. The refrigeration plant confirmed he clocked in that night. Case closed, except one detective refused to let it go. Detective Ray Donnelly had spent 22 years working homicide before transferring to missing persons after a heart attack nearly killed him on duty. He believed instincts mattered more than evidence during the first 48 hours of a disappearance. And according to Donnelly, Daniel Harlow gave off the wrong feeling immediately. Not fear, not grief, annoyance, as if the investigation inconvenienced him. Donnelly later described their first interview in a single sentence. He answered every question too perfectly. Still, There was nothing concrete. No forensic evidence connected Harlow to the crime. No eyewitness placed him inside the Mercer house. The truck revealed nothing. Detectives searched his property twice with warrants and found only old tools, rusted machinery, and stacks of unopened mail. Then the case began to rot. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Leads dried up. Reporters stopped calling. Volunteers disappeared. Lily's missing poster faded beneath sun and rain until only her eyes remained visible on the telephone poles. But something inside Ashford County changed after that night. People locked doors. Parents stopped letting children walk home alone. Rumors spread through grocery stores and church parking lots like smoke. Some believed Lily had been abducted by a drifter passing through town. Others believed she drowned in the marsh during the storm. And then there were whispers about Daniel Harlow. Nothing specific, just whispers. Women claimed he stared too long. Teenagers said his truck sometimes appeared parked near the high school after dark. One cashier at the local market reported seeing scratches on his forearms days after Lily vanished. But none of it could be proven. Years passed. The case file thickened with dead ends. Psychics called the sheriff's office claiming visions of water and buried clothing. Prison inmates confessed falsely for attention. Detectives followed leads across 3 states only to circle back empty-handed every time. And through it all, Daniel Harlow stayed in Ashford County. Still quiet, still watching, still living directly across from the Mercer home. That became the detail outsiders found hardest to understand. Lily's parents never moved. Neither did Harlow. For nearly 2 decades, they existed across the street from each other, like survivors trapped inside the same nightmare. Mrs. Mercer reportedly stopped checking her mailbox during daylight because she could not bear seeing him outside watering plants. People began crossing the street to avoid him. Children dared each other knock on his door during Halloween. But suspicion alone means nothing in a courtroom. And eventually, even Detective Donnelly retired. The cold case entered storage in 2009. Boxes sealed. Evidence cataloged. Silence. Until a storm returned to Ashford County in the summer of 2021. Almost identical to the night Lily disappeared. Heavy rain. Violent wind. Power outages rolling through neighborhoods after midnight. And inside a small roadside bar 20 miles north of town, a drunken argument exploded between 2 brothers. Witnesses later said the older brother looked terrified. Not angry. Terrified. Because the younger brother kept repeating one sentence over and over loud enough for everyone to hear. You should have told him what Danny did to that girl. The entire room reportedly went silent. Within 24 hours, state investigators reopened the Mercer case. And buried beneath 20 years of rumors, faded reports, and forgotten interviews, they uncovered a secret so disturbing it would fracture Ashford County forever. Not because a monster had hidden among them, but because some people suspected the truth long before police ever proved it. And they said nothing. The bar sat beside Route 16, like a forgotten building waiting to collapse. Faded neon lights buzzed in the rain. Beer signs flickered against windows stained yellow by decades of cigarette smoke. Truckers stopped there after midnight because nobody asked questions. Locals went there because there was nowhere else to go. And on the night everything changed, every person inside remembered the exact moment the shouting started. Tyler Harlow was drunk before he walked through the door. Witnesses said his clothes were soaked from the storm. Mud covered his boots halfway to the knee. He slammed cash onto the counter, ordered whiskey, then immediately started arguing with his older brother Daniel sitting alone in the back corner. The same Daniel Harlow detectives questioned 20 years earlier. Only now he looked older, thinner, gray spreading through his beard, hands shaking slightly as he lit cigarette after cigarette beneath the hanging pool table lamp. People noticed the tension instantly. Tyler kept drinking. Daniel kept telling him to lower his voice. Then Tyler said the sentence that froze the room. You should have told him what Danny did to that girl. At first, nobody reacted, because everyone in Ashford County knew exactly which girl he meant, and nobody wanted to believe what they were hearing. The bartender later told investigators the silence felt unnatural, like the entire building stopped breathing at once. Even the storm outside seemed quieter. Daniel stood up immediately. Witnesses described panic in his face. Real panic, not anger. He grabbed Tyler by the arm and tried pulling him toward the exit, but Tyler shoved him backward hard enough to knock over a chair. Then came another sentence. She was still alive when you brought her there. Daniel reportedly whispered something nobody could hear. Tyler answered louder. You buried her anyway. By sunrise, investigators had 6 witness statements. By noon, detectives were knocking on Daniel Harlow's door for the first time in 12 years. But Daniel Harlow was gone. His truck missing. Phone disconnected. House empty. Inside the kitchen sink, investigators found shredded paper stuffed down the drain. In the fireplace, partially burned photographs still smoldered beneath wet ash. One detective described the scene as a man trying to erase himself in under an hour. State police issued an alert before sunset. For the first time since 2001, the Mercer case exploded back into national headlines. Florida 2001 cold case reopened. Neighbor disappears after shocking bar confession. Possible human remains search underway. Satellite trucks returned to Ashford County almost overnight. Reporters crowded outside the sheriff's office. Internet forums flooded with theories. Retired Detective Ray Donnelly received dozens of calls from journalists asking the same question. Did you always suspect Daniel Harlow? Donnelly answered carefully. I suspected somebody who knew more than they admitted. But privately, he told investigators something else. Something he never included in official reports. Back in 2001, during the second search of Harlow's property, cadaver dogs reacted aggressively near an old tool shed behind the house. Not once, 3 separate times. But excavation found nothing. No body, no blood, no physical evidence. At the time, supervisors dismissed it as contamination from animal remains or old hunting equipment. Now detectives wondered if they stopped digging too soon. Ground-penetrating radar arrived the following morning. Officers sealed the property with yellow tape, while crowds gathered across the street near the Mercer residence. Some people watched from lawn chairs. Others stood silently holding faded photographs of Lily Mercer taken 20 years earlier. And across from them, inside the upstairs window of the Mercer house, Lily's mother watched investigators tear apart Daniel Harlow's backyard. Without moving, without speaking. The first discovery came at 2:43 p.m. A rusted metal barrel buried beneath concrete slabs behind the shed. Inside, investigators found burned fabric fragments, melted plastic zip ties, and a necklace chain fused together by heat. The chain matched one Lily Mercer wore regularly in school photographs. Suddenly, the entire investigation changed. Crime scene technicians expanded the search perimeter immediately. Soil samples were collected. Excavators arrived before dark. Then a second discovery stopped everyone cold. Beneath 6 feet of packed earth near the tree line, investigators uncovered a section of blue tarp wrapped tightly around something long and narrow. Human remains. Partial skeletal remains later identified as Lily Mercer through dental records. The news shattered Ashford County. People cried openly in grocery store parking lots. Church bells rang that evening, without announcement. Television anchors called it one of Florida's most disturbing cold case developments in decades. But the horror was only beginning, because a medical examiner found evidence Lily Mercer may not have died the night she vanished. Fractures suggested prolonged restraint. Small healing injuries indicated she survived for days after the abduction, possibly longer. That revelation transformed Daniel Harlow from suspected kidnapper into something far worse inside the public imagination, a monster living quietly across the street, while Lily's parents searched for her year after year. The fury inside Ashford County became explosive. People drove past Harlow's property screaming threats from car windows. Someone spray-painted killer across his garage door before sunrise. Vigil groups formed online demanding immediate arrest. But investigators still faced one enormous problem. Daniel Harlow had disappeared, and Tyler Harlow suddenly refused to cooperate. The moment detectives brought him in for questioning, his entire story changed. He claimed he was drunk, claimed he exaggerated for attention, claimed he knew nothing specific about Lily Mercer's death. Investigators didn't believe him for 1 second. Neither did Detective Donnelly. Because according to Donnelly, Tyler's fear wasn't a fear of a liar. It was a fear of somebody who finally realized he talked too much. Phone records revealed multiple calls between the brothers immediately before the bar incident. Financial records showed Tyler received large cash deposits from Daniel over several years. Investigators also learned Tyler once worked briefly at the same refrigeration plant in 2001 before abruptly quitting. Then another witness surfaced. A retired school bus driver named Helen Grady, 73 years old. For 20 years, she told nobody what she saw because she convinced herself it meant nothing, until she saw Daniel Harlow's face on television again. Helen told detectives that 3 days after Lily vanished, she noticed Daniel's truck parked behind an abandoned citrus warehouse near Blackwater Creek around dawn. She remembered the detail because nobody used that road anymore, and because Daniel looked terrified when he noticed her bus approaching. According to Helen, he was dragging something heavy wrapped in blue tarp across muddy ground, the same type of tarp later found around Lily's remains. Detectives rushed to Blackwater Creek immediately. Search teams uncovered another buried site, less than half a mile from the warehouse. This one empty, but not clean. Traces of old blood remained in the soil beneath collapsed concrete debris, enough to suggest somebody had been held there. Forensic teams discovered rusted chain bolts embedded in the walls of the abandoned structure. One room contained deep scratches running vertically along cement surfaces, as if somebody trapped inside had clawed desperately trying to escape. The building instantly became the center of the investigation. Reporters nicknamed it the Creek House. Former locals began coming forward with stories. Teenagers once dared each other to enter the abandoned warehouse at night. Hunters reported hearing generators running their years earlier. One anonymous caller claimed Daniel Harlow visited the property regularly during the early 2000s. Then came the detail investigators never expected. Electric company records showed power had been illegally diverted to the structure for nearly 8 months after Lily Mercer disappeared. Someone had been using that building long after the searches ended. The possibility horrified everyone involved, because it suggested Lily may have been hidden alive while volunteers' search was only miles away. The Mercer family stopped speaking publicly after that revelation. Friends said Lily's father smashed every television inside the house after hearing the news conference. Meanwhile, authorities launched a statewide manhunt for Daniel Harlow. Gas station cameras captured his truck heading north toward Georgia less than 4 hours after the bar confrontation. Then the trail vanished completely. No bank activity. No confirmed sightings. Nothing. And as investigators dug deeper into Harlow's past, they uncovered details that made the entire town question how well they ever knew him at all. Daniel Harlow lied about nearly everything. His employment history contained unexplained gaps stretching months at a time. An ex-girlfriend from Alabama described him as obsessive and controlling. Another woman claimed he installed locks on the outside of bedroom doors inside their shared apartment. Then detectives discovered a sealed juvenile record from 1981 involving the disappearance of a 14-year-old girl in rural Mississippi. No charges were filed. The girl was never found. But Daniel Harlow lived less than 2 miles away at the time. Suddenly, investigators faced a terrifying possibility. Lily Mercer might not have been his first victim. FBI profilers joined the case within days. Analysts began re-examining unsolved disappearances across 3 southern states, connected loosely to towns where Harlow previously lived. Patterns emerged quickly. Young women, stormy nights, remote locations, victims vanishing without signs of struggle. The media frenzy intensified beyond control. National networks broadcast live outside the excavation sites. True crime podcasts flooded the internet overnight. Amateur investigators descended upon Ashford County searching woods with drones and metal detectors. And through all of it, one question haunted investigators more than any other. Why had Daniel Harlow stayed? Why continue living across from the Mercer family for 20 years? Most killers flee. Most predators distance themselves from the memory of what they've done. But Harlow remained directly beside the people he destroyed. Detective Donnelly believed he understood why. He liked watching the grief. He he told investigators privately. Some men relive crimes through memories. Others relive them by staying close to pain. Then came the phone call. 3 weeks after the remains were discovered, a state trooper in southern Georgia spotted an abandoned white pickup truck near a flooded stretch of woodland outside Waycross. Daniel Harlow's truck. Driver's door open. Keys still inside. And 20 feet away, investigators found fresh footprints leading directly into the swamp. But no sign of Daniel Harlow himself. Only darkness, still water, and the growing feeling that the man at the center of one of Florida's most disturbing cold cases had vanished once again. The swamp outside Waycross, Georgia, does not behave like normal terrain. It swallows light. It distorts sound. Even radio static seems to flatten there, as if the air itself refuses to carry information beyond a few yards. That's where Daniel Harlow's truck was found. Not crashed, not abandoned in panic. Parked, deliberately angled toward the tree line like whoever left it intended to walk away and never look back. The driver's door hung open just enough for rainwater to pool along the seat. Keys still in the ignition. Engine cold, but not long cold. The kind of cooling that suggests minutes, not hours. Deputies arrived first, then state investigators, then FBI agents moving to the mud in silence, scanning for something they couldn't yet name. And 20 feet into the swamp, they found footprints. At first, there were many of them, overlapping, confused, circling slightly as if the person stopped to think. Then only one set remained. Deep, heavy, moving straight into water that rose past knee level within seconds. After that, nothing. No return trail. No drag marks. No struggle at the edge of land. Just disappearance. Again, the same word that had defined Lily Mercer's case for 2 decades suddenly reappeared in a different shape. Disappearance, but now attached to the suspect himself. Inside the truck, investigators found something that changed the tone of the entire search. A folded piece of paper tucked beneath the passenger seat. Not a confession. Not a note of apology. A map. Hand-drawn. Precise. Familiar. And when analysts matched the markings against archive case files, they realized what they were looking at. Locations from Ashford County. The Mercer residence. The abandoned citrus warehouse at Blackwater Creek. And a third site that had never been publicly disclosed. A remote stretch of land south of the original search perimeter, labeled only with a single word written in block letters. Safe. The word made no sense to anyone who read it. Safe for whom? Or from whom? Back in Ashford County, the discovery hit like another storm rolling in too fast to prepare for. News vans that had started leaving returned overnight. Helicopters circled again over pine forests and marshland. Residents who thought the nightmare had finally ended found themselves locking doors they had stopped locking years earlier. But inside the Mercer home, there was no reaction at all. Lily's mother sat in the same chair she had occupied since the remains were recovered. She did not speak to reporters, did not move when lights flashed outside the windows, did not respond when officers knocked to update her on the swamp search. It was as if the world had finally become too loud to process. Meanwhile, in Georgia, search teams expanded outward. Diver units entered submerged sections of the swamp. Helicopters scanned canopy gaps. Dogs were brought in despite warnings that scent trails in waterlogged terrain would be nearly impossible to follow. Still, they searched, because they had no choice. Daniel Harlow had vanished into a place where the land itself refused to give answers. Then on the second night, something unexpected surfaced. A tarp fragment, caught on a submerged root system beneath dark water. Blue, weathered, familiar. Forensic teams recovered it carefully. Back on shore under floodlights, analysts confirmed what everyone already feared. The material matched the same composition as the tarp found with Lily Mercer's remains. Not identical, but manufactured in the same industrial batch. That detail shifted everything again, because it suggested a pattern of preparation, not improvisation, not panic, something structured, repeated. And if Harlow was responsible for Lily Mercer, then the evidence was pointing towards something investigators had avoided naming out loud. Serial behavior. By the third day of the swamp search, Frustration began to replace urgency. There were no further footprints, no additional personal items, no sign of clothing caught in branches or debris. It was as if Daniel Harlow had entered the swamp and dissolved into it. But Detective Ray Donnelly, brought back as a consultant despite retirement, refused to accept the simplicity of that conclusion. He stood near the edge of the search perimeter, watching divers move through black water, and said something that unsettled the younger agents. "He didn't come here to disappear," Donnelly said. "He came here because he knew this place would confuse us long enough for him to decide what happens next." No one responded, because nobody liked the implication that Harlow was still thinking ahead, still controlling distance, still shaping the investigation, even while missing. Meanwhile, in Ashford County, the second wave of discoveries began quietly, not from law enforcement, from paperwork, old municipal records stored in a basement archive beneath the county courthouse. A clerk reviewing unrelated files noticed repeated property access logs tied to Daniel Harlow over the years, not for his residence, for public land permits, trails, maintenance zones, restricted forestry sections, all signed off legally, all approved, but one name kept appearing beside his in the approval chain. A former county inspector named Robert Kell, retired, lived 3 towns over. No known connection to Harlow publicly. Investigators brought him in for questioning within 48 hours. At first, Kell insisted he barely remembered approving routine permits. Then, under pressure, his answers changed, then fractured, then stopped making sense. And finally, in a recorded interview that would later circulate through every major news network, he said something that shifted the emotional center of the entire case. "I didn't think it mattered," Kell said. "He always said he was clearing land for equipment storage. He said he needed privacy because of family issues." Detectives leaned forward. "What kind of equipment?" Kell hesitated, then answered, "Cold storage units, portable ones." The room went silent, because refrigeration, storage, isolation. It wasn't random anymore. It was structured. Cold case investigators immediately connected that detail back to Harlow's employment at the industrial refrigeration plant in 2001. And suddenly, pieces began aligning in a way that made seasoned agents visibly uncomfortable. Cold environments, remote locations, storm nights, abandoned structures, temporary power usage, transportable equipment, not chaos, infrastructure, a system, a method of control hidden in plain sight under guise of ordinary work. Back in Georgia, the swamp search shifted from recovery to containment. Authorities no longer believed Daniel Harlow was simply missing. They began considering the possibility he was observing them, because multiple officers reported strange activity at the perimeter during night hours. Footsteps near the tree line, faint mechanical sounds echoing across water. Once, a flashlight beam sweeping across the swamp from a distance that should have been unreachable. But every time units moved toward the source, it vanished, as if it were never there. Then came the most disturbing development yet. A second map was found, not in the truck, not in the swamp, but mailed anonymously to the Ashford County Sheriff's Office. No return address, no fingerprints, just a sealed envelope containing a photocopy of the same handwritten map recovered from Harlow's vehicle, except this version had additions, new markings, new locations, and one annotation written in the margin beside the Mercer property. Too late. The phrase triggered immediate psychological profiling updates. FBI analysts began reevaluating Harlow not as a fugitive, but as someone actively communicating through controlled exposure, someone who understood investigation cycles, someone who knew exactly how long authorities would search before shifting focus, someone who might still be guiding attention, even while gone. The fear spreading through agencies was no longer about capture. It was about narrative control. Because if Harlow was still influencing the investigation, then every discovery so far might not be an endpoint. It might be a setup. Detective Donnelly said it first in a closed briefing. "If he's alive," he said quietly, "then we're not chasing him. We're following instructions." And for the first time since the case reopened, No one disagreed out loud. Meanwhile, Tyler Harlow, now in protective custody, finally broke, not in a dramatic confession, not in full disclosure, but in fragments, disjointed statements recorded across multiple interviews. He never left the system. He always had places no one checked. He said people only look where they're told to look. And then, the line that investigators replayed more than any other. He told me she wasn't the first place he built. Built, not buried, not hidden, built. That single word reframed everything, because it suggested intention beyond impulse, design beyond opportunity, structure beyond crime. Outside the interrogation room, agents began pulling every available historical record tied to Daniel Harlow's early life. School records, juvenile reports, employment logs, property ownership trails. And what they found was not a clean origin, but a gradual expansion of influence, small access points, minor permissions, overlapping jurisdictions, a slow accumulation of unnoticed space, enough to operate in blind spots for years. And then, deep in the swamp, a search dog suddenly stopped moving, not barking, not pulling, just freezing in place at the edge of a collapsed drainage trench. The handler called it in. Ground teams converged, and beneath layers of sediment and waterlogged vegetation, they found something that had not been there before. A sealed metal container, industrial grade, cold to the touch despite the swamp heat, and locked from the outside. When they opened it, they did not find Daniel Harlow, but they did find evidence that someone had been using it recently. Fresh condensation inside, disturbed insulation, and a faint residue that forensic teams refused to identify immediately on site. The container was removed under full containment protocol, and as it left the swamp, every investigator present understood the same unsettling possibility. Whatever Daniel Harlow had built in Ashford County, it might not have ended with Lily Mercer. It might have been continuing the entire time. The sealed container was transported under armed escort, its metal walls sweating in the humid Georgia air like something still trying to breathe from the inside out. No one spoke during the convoy. Even the radio stayed unusually quiet, as if static itself might attract attention. By the time it reached the temporary forensic facility outside Waycross, the mood had shifted from pursuit to containment, because now the investigation was no longer about where Daniel Harlow had gone. It was about what he had left behind. Inside the mobile lab, technicians worked under sterile light, documenting every inch of the container before opening it fully. The first layer revealed reinforced insulation, industrial grade, the kind used in cold storage transport systems. The second layer revealed modifications, hand-cut reinforcements, non-standard locking mechanisms, and wiring that did not match any commercial blueprint. It wasn't just a container. It had been altered, adapted, personalized. When the final latch released, the air inside shifted slightly, not dramatically, not visibly, but enough for one technician to pause before stepping closer. Inside was not a body, not evidence of immediate death, but something far more unsettling in its ambiguity. Blankets, folded, carefully stacked, empty plastic food containers, a water bottle marked with faint teeth indentations, and beneath it all, carved into metal floor, words scratched repeatedly until the surface had worn thin. Not safe yet. The phrase hit the room harder than any biological evidence could have, because it implied duration, time, presence. Someone had been inside that container long enough to write fear into steel. FBI analysts immediately reclassified the discovery from evidence container to possible containment environment, a phrase no one liked using outside theoretical case studies. In Ashford County, news of the container spread faster than official reports. People who once believed the case was solved with Lily Mercer's remains now found themselves revisiting every assumption they had made over 2 decades. Because the container changed the timeline, it suggested that whatever had happened to Lily Mercer was not a single moment in 2001. It was part of something longer, something structured, something maintained. Detective Ray Donnelly reviewed the initial reports alone in a quiet office away from the media storm. His notes from 2001 were spread across the table like fragments of a puzzle that had never been properly assembled. And for the first time, he noticed something he had missed before. Small inconsistencies in witness statements, shifts in timing that never fully aligned, gaps in alibis that had been dismissed as human error rather than pattern disruption. He leaned back in his chair and muttered one sentence no one else in the room heard. We weren't dealing with a disappearance. We were dealing with a system. Meanwhile, Tyler Harlow was transferred again, this time to federal custody outside the state. But before the transfer, he requested one final interview. No lawyers present, just recording equipment. Agents agreed, expecting collapse, confession, or contradiction. What they received instead was something far more fragmented. Tyler stared at the table for nearly a full minute before speaking. He didn't take her, he said. One agent immediately responded. We recovered remains. We confirmed. Tyler interrupted without raising his voice. He didn't take her away, he repeated. He kept her where he could still control it. The room went still. Agents exchanged glances but said nothing. Tyler continued. You all keep thinking it was about hiding bodies. That's not what he cared about. What did he care about? The lead investigator asked. Tyler looked up for the first time. Distance, he said. How close he could stay without anyone noticing. That sentence shifted the psychological framing of the entire case again, because it suggested proximity as a motive, not escape, not concealment. Presence. Back in Georgia, forensic analysis of the container revealed something even more disturbing. Embedded in one corner of the insulation were trace fibers consistent with long-term habitation, not temporary storage. Sustained use. And beneath the industrial lining, investigators discovered something that forced them to expand the search perimeter again. Scratches, not random, directional, markings aligned in repeating patterns. Some resembled tally marks. Others formed crude directional indicators. But one sequence stood out. A set of symbols repeated in clusters of 5, spaced evenly across the interior surface. When analyzed, they appeared to correspond to dates. Specific nights. Storm events. Dates that matched known disappearances across multiple counties in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama over a span of nearly 2 decades. Suddenly, the case expanded beyond Ashford County entirely. This was no longer a single missing person investigation. It was a multi-state pattern of structured abduction, events hidden beneath unrelated cold cases. And Daniel Harlow, if still alive, was no longer suspect. He was the only consistent link. Search efforts intensified again, this time shifting from swamp recovery to regional pattern tracing. Analysts built a timeline stretching back to the late 1990s, mapping every storm-related disappearance involving young women within a 300-mile radius of Ashford County. What emerged was a disturbing cluster, not perfectly aligned, but close enough to suggest deliberate selection. Each case shared overlapping conditions: weather disruption, low visibility, rural adjacency, temporary communication failure, and most chilling of all, proximity to infrastructure Harlow had access to at some point in his employment history: the refrigeration plant, the permit zones, the warehouse sites, the abandoned structures. It began to look less like coincidence and more like operational familiarity. Then came a breakthrough no one expected. A retired electrician from Ashford County came forward after seeing renewed coverage of the case. He had worked occasional contracts in the early 2000s maintaining rural power lines. And he remembered something unusual: a series of unauthorized power draws in remote areas near Blackwater Creek. Not enough to trigger major alarms, but consistent enough to notice if someone was paying attention. He described it as someone running equipment off-grid for short bursts, usually during storms when no one would question noise or outages. When investigators matched those reports with missing persons timelines, the correlation was undeniable. Storm nights were not random. They were strategic, design conditions. And suddenly, Lily Mercer's disappearance no longer looked like an isolated tragedy. It looked like a scheduled event. Back in Ashford County, Lily's mother finally broke her silence. but not in the way reporters expected. She did not cry on camera. She did not demand justice. She simply stood outside her home as evening fell and said one sentence to the gathered press. He always knew when to come outside. Then she went back inside and closed the door. No further explanation was given, but detectives understood what she meant. Daniel Harlow had been there, across the street, watching, not occasionally, not randomly, consistently. That realization reframed every memory neighbors had ever reported, every sighting, every rumor, every uneasy feeling people had dismissed as paranoia. It was not perception. It was pattern recognition they had lacked the context to understand. As night fell across Georgia again, search teams received a final unexpected signal. Motion detection sensors placed near the swamp perimeter triggered simultaneously in 3 separate locations. Not animals, not weather, movement, coordinated movement. But by the time units arrived, there was nothing visible, only disturbed water, and faint impressions in the mud leading away from containment site. Parallel tracks, fresh enough to suggest recent passage, too organized to suggest wildlife, and too deliberate to be coincidence. Detective Donnelly stared at the footage replay in silence, then said the sentence no one wanted to document. "He's not running from us," he said. "He's repositioning." And for the first time since the case reopened, investigators began to consider a possibility that had been unthinkable only weeks earlier, that Daniel Harlow had not vanished in panic. He had withdrawn intentionally, and whatever he was doing next had already begun. The swamp did not stay quiet for long. At 3:12 a.m., every perimeter sensor along the Georgia search zone triggered at once. Not sequential, not gradual, simultaneous, like something had crossed an invisible line that the system itself had been waiting for. Floodlights snapped on across the treeline, cutting through fog in harsh white beams. Helicopters lifted from temporary pads. Ground teams moved in formation, boots sinking into black water and mud that seemed to swallow sound before it could travel. And yet, there was no visible target, no running figure, no heat signature, only movement on the edges of detection, as if something had passed through the system without fully existing inside it. Then came the radio transmission that changed the tone of the entire operation. Possible structure detected. At first, command assumed miscommunication. Swamp terrain produces false positives all the time. Old debris, shifting ground, collapse with forming unnatural shapes beneath water. But the second transmission removed out. Repeat, structure confirmed. Subsurface geometry inconsistent with natural formation. Within 20 minutes, excavation units were rerouted, and deep inside the swamp, beneath layers of sediment and decaying vegetation, ground-penetrating radar revealed something that should not have been there. A linear corridor, narrow, man-made, extending beneath the marsh in a straight alignment that ignored natural geography entirely. It was not a cave, not erosion. It was constructed space. And it led somewhere. Detective Ray Donnelly arrived on site just before sunrise. He stood at the edge of the perimeter, watching technicians map the underground anomaly in real time. His face showed no surprise, only the slow recognition of something he had unconsciously feared for years. "This is not new," he said quietly. An engineer looked up. "Sir." Donnelly pointed toward the radar display. "That line," he said. "It's too clean, too intentional. Nobody built something like that recently. Not here, not under this terrain." He paused, then added almost reluctantly, "This was maintained." The word maintained shifted the entire atmosphere because it implied continuity. Someone tending it, returning to it, keeping it usable. Search teams began controlled excavation along the marked entry point. What they uncovered first was a reinforced hatch. Metal, rusted but intact, sealed beneath camouflage debris. The locking mechanism had been designed from industrial components not native to any known residential or commercial blueprint in the region. It required specialized tools to open. When it finally gave way, the air that escaped from below was cold. Not swamp cold, artificial cold. Engineered temperature difference. A technician muttered into his mask, "That's refrigeration grade." No one responded, because the implication was already forming in everyone's mind. Cold storage, underground, hidden beneath wetlands that were already difficult to search. A system built to avoid detection through environmental camouflage alone. Lights were lowered as a descent team prepared to enter. Donnelly stopped him at the edge. "Wait," he said. He crouched near the opening and listened. For a long moment, there was only swamp noise above ground. Crickets, water movement, distant aircraft. Then, faintly, something else. A low mechanical hum, intermittent, like machinery cycling on and off somewhere deep below. Donnelly stood slowly. "He's still using it," he said. Inside the tunnel, the descent team moved carefully, cables feeding behind them as they lowered into engineered darkness. Walls were not natural. They were lined with composite material reinforced against moisture intrusion. Electrical conduits ran along the ceiling, some active, some dead, and every 20 meters, markings appeared on the wall. Not graffiti, not random scratches, directional indicators, repeating symbols. The same pattern found inside the container. 5 marks, spaced evenly, repeated in sequence. One of the engineers stopped and pointed. "These are intervals," he said. "What kind of intervals?" another asked. He hesitated before answering. "Time-based," he said, "like checkpoints." Deeper in, the corridor widened slightly into a chamber. This one was different. Not storage, not transit, a control space. Old monitors lined one wall, powered intermittently through an unstable backup system. Most screens were dead. A few flickered with corrupted input. Static images, unreadable data streams, and fragmented video loops too degraded to identify clearly. But one monitor still functioned. Barely. It displayed a live feed, swamp surface above. The entry point, the exact location where investigators had opened the hatch. Someone had been watching them from below. At that moment, every person in the chamber froze, because the realization was unavoidable. They had not discovered an abandoned system. They had entered an active one. Back on the surface, command units received a sudden transmission from inside the tunnel. Not distress, not discovery. A single word. Stop. Then silence. Radio contact cut completely. For 17 seconds, there was nothing. Then the signal returned distorted. Movement below. A voice said, "Unknown subject presence confirmed." Visual not stable. And then something else. A second voice. Not from the team. Not from command. Faint. Filtered. Echoing through interference, like it was coming from deeper within the structure itself. "It's not finished yet." The line repeated once, then vanished. Above ground, panic spread through command structure. Evacuation protocols were considered, but Donnelly refused. He stepped forward, staring into the hatch. "He's not speaking to us," he said. "He's speaking through it." And then he made a decision that no one officially authorized, but no one stopped either. He went down. The tunnel swallowed light quickly. Each step deeper felt less like descent and more like entry into something sealed away from surface logic. The air became colder, more controlled. Mechanical resonance increased, until the descent team reached the chamber again. But it had changed. The monitors were no longer flickering randomly. They were synchronized, all displaying the same feed, the swamp entry point. And now, something new appeared in frame. A figure, standing just beyond the cleared perimeter. Too far for facial recognition, but close enough to confirm presence. Still, watching. Then, slowly, the figure raised something toward the camera. A handheld radio. And through static, a voice returned to the tunnel system. Calm, measured, recognizable only in tone, not clarity. "You shouldn't have opened it yet." The transmission cut again, and in that moment, every investigator in the chamber understood the same thing without speaking it. Daniel Harlow was not simply missing. He was connected to the structure, not metaphorically, operationally. And whatever system had been built beneath Ashford County was not only active, It was aware of them. Above ground, night had fully settled again, and across the swamp, faint mechanical sound began to rise, not louder, but more coordinated, as if something deep below had started responding to the intrusion for the first time in years. And somewhere in that darkness, unseen and unconfirmed, the line between hunter and hunted began to blur in a way no one on the surface was prepared to understand. The moment the signal cut, the tunnel stopped feeling like a place and started feeling like a decision that had already been made long before anyone arrived. Inside the underground chamber, the synchronized monitors held their frozen image of the swamp entry point, but the figure outside the perimeter was no longer visible. The feed stuttered once, twice, then stabilized into something unnerving in its emptiness, an undisturbed clearing, as if the last minute of reality had simply been edited out. Detective Ray Donnelly kept his eyes on the screens longer than anyone else. Then he spoke without turning. He wasn't warning us, he said. He was checking if we were ready. No one asked what that meant. They didn't need to, because the environment itself had already begun changing again. A faint vibration traveled through the tunnel walls, subtle at first, then rhythmic. Not collapse, not seismic shift, mechanical cadence. Like something cycling power through hidden systems embedded deep in the structure. One of the engineers checked his handheld monitor. Power fluctuation increasing, he said. It's not external. It's coming from inside the grid. Inside what grid? Someone asked. He hesitated. The tunnel network. That phrase changed the tone again. Network implied design. Design implied maintenance. Maintenance implied access, which meant whoever built this wasn't just present in the past tense of case. They were still part of its operating logic. Further down the corridor, the descent team discovered branching paths that had not appeared on any prior radar scan. Narrow offshoots extended laterally from the main tunnel, each one marked with the same repeating symbol found in the container and chamber walls. 5 marks. Always 5. Always spaced evenly. One of the agents traced it with a gloved finger. It's not counting, he said quietly. It's scheduling. No one corrected him, because the idea fit too well. The deeper they went, the more the structure stopped behaving like abandoned infrastructure and started behaving like something actively organized. Airflow changed direction in subtle pulses. Lighting systems flickered in response to movement. And once, unmistakably, a section of wall-mounted conduit activated only after the team passed it. Like a system waking up in sequence behind them. Then came the sound. Not loud, not sudden. A distant metallic click echoing through the corridor ahead. Everyone stopped. The descent team raised weapons instinctively, though no one had confirmed a target. Another click followed. Then another. Regular spacing. Controlled timing. Donnelly raised a hand. Hold, he said. They moved forward slowly, step by step, until the corridor opened into a second chamber smaller than the first, but denser in construction. This room was not empty. It contained equipment. Old but functional. Industrial refrigeration units. Modified, rewired, reinforced. Some still running at low capacity, producing faint frost along their exterior seals despite the swamp heat above ground. One technician exhaled sharply. This is impossible, he said. There's no supply chain for this setup. It's been assembled over time. Donnelly looked at the units, then at the walls, then at the ceiling conduits, and finally at the floor markings, where the same 5-symbol pattern repeated in a circular formation. It wasn't assembled, he said. It was built in phases. He stepped closer to one of the refrigeration units. The panel was slightly open. Inside, there were no visible remains, but there were tags. Plastic identification markers. Weathered, stamped with dates. Each one corresponded to known disappearance windows across multiple counties. Not names, not identities, just timing references, like inventory logs. The room went silent, because suddenly the structure was no longer just a hidden facility. It was a record-keeping system, and something inside it had been tracking events for years. Back at the surface, Command received an unexpected transmission from a secondary perimeter unit. Movement detected East Ridge Line, the report said. Then a pause. followed by subject confirmation uncertain. Describe, command responded. Another pause. Then the voice, lower now. It looks like us. Confusion spread through headquarters because thermal imaging showed multiple heat signatures approaching the swamp perimeter from different directions. Not one, several, moving with spacing too deliberate to be random, not running, advancing, coordinated. But when aerial drones were deployed, the visuals contradicted the thermal data entirely. No confirmed human forms, only shifting distortions in vegetation patterns, like something moving just beneath the surface of visibility. Inside the tunnel, Donnelly made a decision. He ordered the team to secure the refrigeration chamber and proceed deeper toward the branching paths. Reluctantly, they complied. Each corridor became narrower, more controlled, more intentionally structured. The architecture stopped resembling accidental underground excavation and started resembling planned compartmentalization. Sections divided by function, some sealed, some open, some clearly reactivated recently. And then they found the first sign that something had passed through recently. Not footprints, condensation, fresh moisture displaced along the floor in a linear path leading deeper into the system. Someone had walked there within hours, maybe less. The trail led to a final junction. 3 directions, left, right, center, each marked with different configurations of the same 5-symbol sequence. But the center path had something else. A new marking, different handwriting, more recent, written directly onto the reinforced wall. You open the wrong end. One of the agents stepped back instinctively. "Is that a threat?" he asked. Donnelly studied it. "No," he said slowly. "It's an observation." Before anyone could respond, a low mechanical hum intensified to the corridor. The tunnel lights flickered in sequence, responding not randomly but in directional progression, left to right, back toward them, as if the system had registered their exact position. Then all monitors in the chamber behind them shut off at once. Not failure. Shut down. Controlled. Intentional. And in the sudden darkness, a voice came to the tunnel intercom system. Not radio static. Not distorted transmission. Clear. Close. You're inside the maintenance layer now. The voice paused, then added, "Don't go further unless you understand what you're maintaining." No one spoke, because the implication of that sentence was too precise. Maintenance layer. Not prison. Not bunker. A system designed to be accessed, used, updated. Donnelly stepped forward. "Who is this?" he said. Silence followed. Then the voice responded. "You already know." And for the first time since the swamp operation began, Detective Ray Donnelly felt something shift, not in the environment, but in interpretation. Because the voice didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like procedure. Back on the surface, surveillance drones finally captured something definitive. At the edge of the swamp perimeter, a figure stood partially obscured by fog, not moving toward the investigation, not fleeing it, just watching the descent point. And beside that figure, something else appeared intermittently in the camera feed. A second silhouette, then a third. But every time the image stabilized, only one remained visible. And across all channels, every system monitoring the swamp began displaying the same final anomaly. 5 repeating signals. Incoming, from beneath the surface, as if the structure itself had started communicating upward for the first time in 20 years. The message didn't arrive like a transmission. It arrived like pressure. Every receiver in the command center, every handheld radio in the swamp perimeter, every monitoring station inside the tunnel system registered the same distortion at the exact same time. Not static, not interference. A structured pulse. 5 beats. Pause. 5 beats again. Then silence. Then a voice. Not localized. Not directional. Distributed. It's stabilizing. Inside the tunnel, Detective Ray Donnelly froze mid-step. The words didn't come through a device anymore. They seemed embedded in the air itself, carried through the infrastructure like it had always been part of the system, and was only now being acknowledged. One of the engineers whispered, "That's not broadcast. That's internal routing." Donnelly didn't answer because he was looking at the walls. The 5-symbol markings were no longer static. They were subtly shifting, not physically moving, but changing in perception depending on angle and light, as if the tunnel itself was recalibrating how it presented information to them. The corridor ahead, the one marked "You opened the wrong end," was now illuminated, not by external lights, by embedded strips activating in sequence, left to right, like instructions being revealed in real time. Donnelly stepped forward slowly, and the tunnel responded. A faint mechanical hum rose from beneath the floor, matching his pace. Every step he took seemed to register somewhere deeper in the system. One of the agents behind him spoke. Search reacting to movement. Donnelly didn't stop. "It's responding," he corrected. "There's a difference." They moved deeper into the center corridor, and with every meter, the architecture became more refined, less abandoned, more intentional. Walls reinforced with layered composite materials. Junctions fitted with access panels that showed signs of repeated opening and resealing over time. Someone had been here recently. Not long ago. Not once. Many times. Then they reached the threshold. A sealed door. Unlike previous barriers, this one had no visible manual mechanism. No external lock. Just a smooth metallic surface embedded with the same 5-mark sequence, arranged in a circular formation. And beneath it, a small engraved line of text. Not final access. Donnelly studied it for a moment, then spoke into his radio. "We've reached a control partition." Command responded immediately. "Confirm status." Donnelly hesitated, then said, "This is not a bunker. It's a layered system." Silence followed. Then Command asked a question no one wanted to hear. Layered for what purpose? Before Donnelly could answer, the door unlocked. Not mechanically. Not manually. It simply responded. A soft click echoed through the corridor as if authorization had already been granted before anyone arrived. The door slid open. Inside was not darkness. It was light. Controlled, dim, steady illumination revealing a space far larger than the tunnel suggested possible. A subterranean control hall, but not abandoned. Active. Monitors lined the walls in symmetrical arrays. Some displayed static data streams. Others showed live feeds of external locations across multiple counties, roads, rural intersections, storm-prone zones, abandoned properties. Each feed labeled with timestamps and weather conditions. Storm mapping, historical overlays, predictive cycles. And at the center of the room stood something that made the entire team instinctively stop. A central console, still running. No dust, no decay. Recent interaction visible in the form of smudges on control surfaces and worn input keys. Someone had been operating this within days. Donnelly stepped forward slowly. "This isn't a hiding place," he said quietly. "It's a command node." One of the engineers scanned the systems, then spoke in a voice that didn't fully sound stable. "These aren't surveillance feeds," he said. "They're scheduled observation points." "What does that mean?" another agent asked. The engineer swallowed. "It means someone wasn't watching randomly. They were waiting for specific conditions." On the central screen, a map displayed in real time. Weather systems tracked across the southeastern United States. Storm formation zones highlighted in shifting patterns. And overlaid on top of it all, point of interest marked in repeating clusters. Each cluster aligned with known disappearance cases, including Lily Mercer. Then something new appeared. A line connecting them. Not straight, not random, sequential, like a path. Donnelly stared at it for a long moment, then said he wasn't choosing victims. He was following conditions. The room went quiet, because that reframed everything again. Not opportunity, not proximity, timing, system behavior, pattern alignment. One of the monitors suddenly flickered, then displayed a live feed, the swamp surface, above the tunnel entry point. And standing there, barely visible through mist and floodlight distortion, was a figure, not moving, not approaching, just present. The same silhouette seen earlier from aerial drones, but now closer, clearer, and unmistakably aware of being observed. The figure raised a hand. not waving, pointing, directly at the ground beneath the command team's position. Then the feed cut. Immediately, all systems in control hall shifted. Monitors recalibrated. Lights dimmed slightly. And the central console emitted a single tone, a confirmation sound, as if an input had just been accepted. Donnelly stepped closer to the console. "Someone is interacting with this," he said. "No," the engineer replied, voice tight. "This is not external input." "Then what is it?" The engineer looked at the screen again, then answered slowly. "It's responding to presence." At that moment, every light in the hall shifted again, and the tunnel behind them sealed. Not with force, not with collapse, with closure. A smooth mechanical slide, sealing the corridor they had entered from, trapping them inside the system. Command overhead began issuing urgent extraction orders, but radio channels were already degrading again into structured pulses. 5 beats. Pause. 5 beats. Then silence. Then the voice returned. Calm. Unhurried. Closer than before. "You've reached operational depth." Donnelly didn't move. He looked at the central console, then at the maps, then at the live feed still looping the swamp surface. And finally he said, "This system was never abandoned." The voice responded immediately. "No." A pause. Then, "It was waiting." And for the first time since the investigation began, Detective Ray Donnelly understood the true scale of what they had entered. Not a crime scene, not a bunker, not even a hidden facility, but a functioning system designed around time, weather, and human behavior. Still active, still adapting, and now fully aware that it had been accessed again after years of silence. Outside, above the swamp, the storm began to return, slowly at first, then all at once, as if the entire environment had been scheduled to resume. The storm did not arrive like weather. It arrived like confirmation. Across the swamp, wind patterns shifted in synchronized bursts, as if pressure systems were aligning to an unseen directive. Rain followed seconds later. Precise, heavy, almost rhythmic. The kind of storm that doesn't drift in, but locks into place. Inside the underground command hall, every monitor flickered at once, then stabilized, then updated. The live feeds across the system began refreshing simultaneously, not randomly, but in a sequence that resembled a countdown. Detective Ray Donnelly stood still, watching the central console as if waiting for it to admit something it had been hiding for years. One of the engineers whispered, "It's syncing with the storm." No one corrected him, because that was exactly what it looked like. The system wasn't reacting to weather. It was aligning with it. On the main display, the map of the southeastern United States reappeared, but now it was overlaid with moving storm cells, each one tracked with surgical precision. And within those cells, points of interest lit up again. Ashford County, Blackwater Creek, Waycross Perimeter, and multiple unnamed rural zones stretching across 3 states. Each one pulsed in sequence. 5 beats. Pause. 5 beats. Donnelly stepped closer to the screen. "This is an observation," he said. "It's activation." The engineer shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "It's coordination." That word changed the atmosphere again, because coordination implied distributed components. Not one site, not one operator. A network. Somewhere behind them, the sealed tunnel entrance vibrated faintly, not collapsing, responding, like something on the other side of the system had registered the presence of the storm and decided to engage. Then the voice returned, not from speakers, not from radios, from everywhere. "You've entered timing range." Donnelly turned sharply. "Who are you talking to?" he demanded. No answer. Instead, the central console displayed a new layer of data, historical overlays, storm events mapped against disappearance cases over 2 decades. And now, something else had been added, markers indicating system access windows, each one aligned with known events, each one paired with a recorded entry in missing persons files. The pattern was no longer subtle. It was explicit. One of the agents stepped back. "This isn't coincidence anymore," he said quietly. This is scheduling. Donnelly nodded once. And we're inside one of the schedules. Above ground, the swamp surface began to change in ways that did not match meteorological behavior. Floodwaters shifted direction slightly. Not enough to notice casually, but enough to show pattern alignment when viewed through drone imaging. Currents were forming organized flow paths toward specific points along the perimeter, as if the environment itself was being guided. Then a new signal hit all devices at once. Not audio, not visual, a coordinate, displayed on every screen, every console, every field device connected to the operation. A single location marker deep within the tunnel system, directly below them, and labeled only with one word, Core. Donnelly looked at it for a long moment, then said, "We're not in the command layer." The engineer looked at him. "What do you mean?" Donnelly didn't take his eyes off the screen. "We've been guided past it." Before anyone could respond, the floor beneath them emitted a low mechanical tone. Then another, then a third. Sequential activation. The chamber lights dimmed further, and the central console shifted again, this time displaying something no one had seen before, a live internal map of the tunnel system. But now it was expanding, adding layers, revealing depth beyond what had been previously accessed. Additional structures appeared beneath them, multiple levels, stacked architecture extending far deeper than initial scans had indicated. One of the engineers spoke slowly. "This isn't a single facility," he said. "It's a vertical system." Donnelly nodded once. "And we're only on the upper interface." The voice returned again, calmer now, almost observational. "You are progressing correctly." That sentence caused a shift in the room, because it implied evaluation, not resistance, not hostility. Assessment. Donnelly stepped toward the console. "If you're here," he said aloud, "then show yourself." A pause. Then the response came. "You already saw me." The monitors flickered again, and for a brief moment, the swamp feed showed something different. Not the surface, not the storm, but an interior corridor. Same markings, same 5-symbol sequence. And standing at the edge of that corridor was a figure, still, watching, not moving toward the camera, not hiding, just observing the system from within it. Then the image cut, and immediately, every access panel in the chamber locked. One by one, sequential sealing. The descent team reacted too late. Exits closed in controlled succession. Not explosive, not violent, systematic. The structure was sealing itself into a contained state. One engineer shouted, "We're being compartmentalized." Another tried forcing a panel open, but stopped when he realized the locking mechanism had already disengaged manual override entirely. Donnelly didn't move. He understood something the others were still struggling with. "This isn't a trap," he said quietly. A pause. "It's a transition." No one asked what that meant, because the answer was already forming on the central screen. A new message appeared. Centered. Simple. Unavoidable. Core access initiated. And beneath it, a countdown began. Not seconds, not minutes, but phases. 5 phases, each marked by a single pulse. Outside, the storm intensified again. But now it was no longer just weather. It was synchronized with the pulses inside the system. Every lightning strike matched the internal rhythm. Every thunder roll aligned with the countdown. And somewhere deep within the swamp, beneath layers of engineered earth and forgotten infrastructure, something that had remained dormant for years began to respond to its first full activation cycle since the night Lily Mercer disappeared. Not as a memory, not as history, but as a system resuming function. The first phase completed without sound. No explosion, no collapse, no dramatic shift in structure. Just a single pulse moving through the system like a heartbeat, finally deciding to continue. Inside the underground command hall, every monitor updated at once. Phase 1, stabilization complete. The lights overhead dimmed slightly, then returned to a steady, colder tone. The air pressure changed in subtle increments, recalibrating itself like the facility was adjusting to the presence of new occupants. Detective Ray Donnelly didn't move. He was watching the central console, but his attention wasn't on the screens anymore. It was on the system itself. Because something fundamental had changed. The facility was no longer reacting to them. It was organizing around them. One of the engineers broke the silence. "This is an escalation," he said quietly. "It's onboarding." No one challenged a word, because it fit too well. Phase 2 began before anyone could respond. A second pulse moved through the structure, deeper and slower than the first. The tunnel walls responded in sequence, lighting strips activating in cascading order that traveled away from the chamber and deeper into the system. The central console updated again. Phase 2, access alignment. And then something unexpected appeared. A directory, not of exits, not of emergency protocols, but of modules. Multiple subsystems listed across the screen, each labeled with operational tags. Observation layer, transport interface, environmental timing grid, containment corridors, record archive. Donnelly stepped closer. "This is modular architecture," he said. The engineer nodded slowly. "It's not one system," he said. "It's a stack of them." As they watched, one module highlighted itself automatically. Record archive. Without input, without command, just activation. The system opened it. Instantly, every monitor in the chamber shifted, and the room filled with footage. Not surveillance from above, not drone imaging. Interior recordings, different locations, different years, all tied together by a consistent environmental pattern. Storms, power fluctuations, rural isolation, and temporal alignment. And in nearly every clip, the same repeating detail appeared. A white pickup truck, sometimes parked, sometimes moving, sometimes partially obscured, but always present. One agent whispered, "That's him." Donnelly didn't respond immediately because he was noticing something else. The timing. Each recording wasn't random playback. They were arranged, sequentially, like chapters. Phase 2 completed. Phase 3 began immediately. And this time, the system spoke without screens. Not through speakers. Not through radios. Through the structure itself. You are now within recorded continuity. The descent team froze. Even Donnelly turned slightly, not toward device, but toward the walls. Because the voice didn't feel external anymore. It felt embedded, like it had always been part of construction. The engineer spoke quietly. "That means we're inside the archive." Donnelly nodded once. "And we're being added." Above them, the storm reached full intensity, but now its rhythm matched the system exactly. Lightning strikes aligned with internal pulses. Thunder followed phase transitions. Rain intensity increased at each structural shift. It was no longer coincidence. It was synchronization. Back in Ashford County, emergency services reported unusual behavior in local infrastructure. Streetlights cycling in repeating patterns. Power grids fluctuating in synchronized intervals. Even traffic cameras rebooting simultaneously across multiple counties. As if something regional had been activated beyond the swamp. But inside the tunnel system, none of that mattered anymore. Phase 3 completed. Phase 4 began. And the central console displayed something new. A live feed, not external, not historical, internal. A camera positioned somewhere deeper within the system. And in that feed, a corridor lit by low emergency lighting stretched forward into darkness. At the end of it stood a figure. Still, watching. The same silhouette, but now closer, clearer. And as the camera zoomed automatically, the image sharpened just enough to confirm what everyone in the chamber already feared. It was not moving away. It was waiting for them to proceed. Donnelly exhaled slowly. "He's inside the system," he said. The engineer corrected him immediately. "No," he said. "He is part of the system." That distinction landed heavily, because it removed the idea of pursuit. There was no chase anymore. Only navigation through something already active. The voice returned again. Calm, measured, finalizing Phase 4. You are approaching core proximity. The central console updated one last time. A schematic appeared. not of tunnels, not of rooms, but of relationships, nodes, connections, a network diagram spanning multiple states. And at the center of it all, one fixed point, marked simply Ashford Node. Beneath it, another label appeared. Operational since 2001. Donnelly stared at it for a long moment, then spoke quietly. This didn't start with Lily Mercer. No one disagreed, because the structure was confirming it in real time. Records expanded further. Earlier entries surfaced. Older cases, older storm alignments, older disappearance patterns, each one feeding into the same system over time. Not random, not reactive, iterative, built through accumulation. And then Phase 5 began, the final pulse. But this one was different. It did not travel outward. It traveled inward. And every screen in the chamber simultaneously shifted to a single message. Core access confirmed. All layers synchronized. A pause. Then a second line appeared beneath it. Welcome back. The lights in the chamber dimmed further. Not failing. Settling. As if the system had completed recognition of authorized presence. Donnelly took a slow step forward. What does that mean? One agent asked behind him. Donnelly didn't answer immediately, because he was finally understanding the implication. This system was not being discovered. It was being resumed. And whatever had happened in 2001 with Lily Mercer was not the beginning. It was the last recorded interruption before operation continued. Above ground, the storm reached a new pattern. Perfect symmetry across radar systems. A circular formation centered directly above the swamp. And inside that circle, every instrument monitoring the region began repeating the same final anomaly. 5 pulses, then silence, then 5 again, as if the entire environment had synchronized with something far below it. And deep inside the system, the core layer finally prepared to open. The core did not open like a door. It unfolded like a memory being forced into the present. Inside the underground system, every light dimmed to near darkness for exactly 3 seconds. Not failure, not blackout, a controlled reset. When illumination returned, the chamber no longer felt like a control room. It felt like a threshold. The central console had shifted again, but this time there were no maps, no feeds, no system diagrams. Only a single interface remained active. A circular sequence of 5 pulses, rotating slowly like a breathing mechanism. Then a line of text appeared beneath it. Core layer. Authorized entry required. Detective Ray Donnelly stood motionless. No one spoke behind him anymore. The descent team had stopped interpreting events in real time. They were waiting for instructions the system never gave. Because at this point, it no longer felt like they were inside something man-made. It felt like they were inside something that had learned how to behave like structure. A low mechanical tone resonated through the floor. Not loud, not alarming, rhythmic, like a lock aligning with a key that had finally arrived after waiting 20 years. Then the voice returned, closer than before. You are standing at the boundary. Donnelly finally responded. Between what? A pause. Then the answer came. Between recorded time and active time. One of the engineers whispered, That doesn't make sense. But Donnelly raised a hand. It does, he said quietly. If the system isn't tracking events, it's storing them. The core interface shifted. The circular pulses expanded outward, revealing concentric layers beneath the visible structure, each layer labeled with timestamps. And now, every layer was active, not archived, not inert, active, like the system was not remembering history, but continuously maintaining it. Then something changed in the chamber air, a faint pressure drop, followed by a subtle shift in sound propagation, as the space itself had adjusted its acoustic properties. And from somewhere deeper inside the structure, a new sound emerged. Footsteps, slow, measured, approaching from below the core interface. Donnelly didn't move. He listened. The footsteps were not random. They followed a pattern of spacing identical to the system's 5-pulse rhythm. Each step aligned with a beat. 1, pause. 2, pause. 3, pause. 4, pause. 5, then silence. Then again, one of the agents raised a weapon instinctively. Donnelly didn't stop him, but he didn't follow the motion either, because he was watching the interface. And the interface was reacting. The circular pulses began accelerating, not randomly, synchronizing with the footsteps, matching them. Then the system spoke again. Core adjacency confirmed. A section of the floor ahead of them began to shift, not collapsing, not opening, reconfiguring, panels sliding inward and outward in overlapping mechanical layers, revealing a vertical passage descending further than anything previously mapped. No ladder, no visible support structure, just engineered depth. Cold air rose from below, artificially controlled, clean, stable, refrigeration grade. Donnelly stepped forward slowly. Behind him, one of the engineers spoke with hesitation. "Sir, we don't have authorization for core access." Donnelly didn't turn. Authorization was never the point, he said. He looked down into the opening, and for the first time, the light from above did not reach the bottom, because there was no visible bottom, only structured darkness. Then the voice returned again. But this time it wasn't coming from the environment. It was coming from below, directly. "You're late," it said. The descent team froze. Donnelly narrowed his eyes slightly. "Late for what?" A pause. Then the answer. "For continuation." The word hung in the air longer than anything else had. Continuation. Not end. Not discovery. Not confrontation. Continuation. And then, without warning, the entire system shifted. All monitors above them shut off simultaneously. The circular interface collapsed inward, and every mechanical sound in the structure synchronized into a single continuous tone. The passage downward illuminated in sequence, step by step, layer by layer, as if inviting descent, or confirming inevitability. Donnelly finally turned back to his team. "We go down," he said. One of the engineers shook his head. "Sir, this is beyond protocol." Donnelly nodded once. Protocol ended when the system started answering. No one stopped him, because no one had a better alternative. They began the descent. The vertical passage was not natural excavation. It was engineered in precision segments, each section reinforced, each junction marked with identical 5-symbol sequences, now appearing more frequently the deeper they went. The air grew colder, more controlled, less organic, and then they saw it, at the next level down. A chamber unlike the others. Not a control room, not storage, not transit, a recording space. Walls lined with dense arrays of archival modules. Physical storage units embedded into structural recesses, some labeled with dates, others with coordinates, others with nothing at all, but all active. Donnelly stepped inside first, and immediately stopped, because the entire room was already occupied, not physically, but visually. Every wall display activated at once. Hundreds of feeds, different locations, different years, different storms, and every single one showing the same white pickup truck at some point in the timeline, always present, always near the edge of something about to happen. One agent whispered, "It's not tracking victims." Donnelly finished the thought. "It's tracking conditions." Then, in the center of the chamber, a single monitor activated independently. No input, no trigger, just activation. And on it appeared a live feed, not from the swamp, not from the tunnel, from inside the structure ahead. A corridor, lit, stable, and at the end of it, standing in the frame, was the figure, closer now than ever before. Still, waiting. And this time, when the camera zoomed, there was no distortion, no ambiguity, only clarity. Not a man fleeing, not a ghost hiding, but someone positioned deliberately inside the system's lowest active layer. And as the image stabilized, the voice returned one final time. No longer distributed, no longer structural, focused, direct. "You've reached me." A pause. Then, "Now you understand why she couldn't leave." The screen cut to black. And for the first time since the investigation began, Detective Ray Donnelly realized the case was no longer about what happened in 2001. It was about what had been running ever since. The black screen did not stay black for long. It flickered once, then returned, not to the corridor, not to the swamp, not to any known camera feed, but to something far more controlled. A static frame, centered, stabilized, a single room, smaller than the others, stripped of industrial clutter. No consoles, no maps, no visible infrastructure. Just a chair, metal, bolted to the floor, and behind it, a wall marked with the same 5-symbol sequence, but larger this time, repeated in concentric circles like an emblem rather than a code. Detective Ray Donnelly stepped closer, without realizing it. No one else moved, because everyone understood instinctively that whatever was being shown was not surveillance anymore. It was presentation. The voice returned. Calm, unhurried, almost patient. You were seeing the origin layer. One of the engineers swallowed hard. Origin of what? He asked. No answer immediately. Instead, the chair in the feed shifted slightly. Not because of wind, not because of impact, because something had just left it. A faint indentation remained on the seat cushion, still holding shape, as if someone had stood up only seconds ago. Donnelly narrowed his eyes. This isn't current, he said quietly. This is replay.